Top of the morning to you, Griff. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Nyc and Griff Show. Today is Saturday, January 8th, 2022. What time is it here? 8:17. Happy to have you here. Let's do a quick check-in here before we get cracking some of these prices here. So we're looking at, let's look at Bitcoin here. Bitcoin is at a whopping 41.9. How do we feel about the Bitcoin price there? Just real quick, Griff, how do we feel about the Bitcoin price here today?
We don't. One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin.
One Bitcoin's one Bitcoin. It's good stuff. How about the S&P here? 1 day, 46.77. Things are kind of trading weird right now for sure. Let's zoom out here and get maybe a 5-year look.
Looks overpriced to me.
Looks overpriced, huh? How about the S&P here? Things are cruising.
Always. Jesus.
All right, there's the market update. What do you think? Markets are weird right now. Things are trading crazy. We got inflation running rampant. A lot of crazy stuff moving right now. Gotta love it.
I think it's pretty incredible for us to be starting a podcast in the midst of what's currently going on. I think it's pretty crazy. I was pretty excited yesterday too, getting into the price of Bitcoin real quick and it being at floating around 40 to 42 or whatever over the last couple of days. And it's dipped. And I now have officially been in Bitcoin long enough where I'm like, what are you guys worried about? What are we talking about here? Just buy it. I don't this is a dip, I guess. But, if you really want this to dip, this thing should say 20. I mean, if you're a real Bitcoiner, you're really go to 10. I don't give a fuck. Then I'll get a whole coin. So that's my thoughts on today's current price, just because one Bitcoin is always one Bitcoin. So,
yeah. It's definitely interesting, and it'll be interesting to come back to these times and look at what our thoughts are versus later on when it's $100 or $200 or $300,000 a coin. And it is right now. You see all the fear index that people post all over Twitter, and it's a ton of fear out there right now.
That 10,
yeah, and so ton of fear out there. But then you go back and you look at. People have done with us just coming through the holidays, people are, the Bitcoin price on Christmas Day from the beginning, right? It's it increases exponentially almost every single year. So it'll be interesting to come back here and see what the thoughts are of the current landscape. But man, let's get into it today. Griff, I know you formed up a little outline for us here. So I think we're going to get into, who are we, this being episode number 1. So Griff, maybe you can open us up with who are we? Why are we friends? How did we get together? How did this whole thing get cracking?
Yeah, so me and Nick we want to just start our first episode off with just letting you guys know who we are. So me and Nick are actually just both former college quarterbacks that met at what was my last school at the University of Albany, and that's the school where Nick went to after his junior college. And we met in the summer of 2019, about to go play football, both of what we didn't know was our senior years. And we ended up becoming pretty much best friends. We ended up living together for about 8 months going into COVID. And we took all economics classes at the State University of New York together. We took all kinds of different money classes, got in all kinds of arguments. Went actually two completely separate ways, almost right after college. But now we're here. I think we're here because we feel very strongly that Bitcoin is not just the future, but it's the way towards mankind's best possible future. And that's kind of, I guess, my fundamental belief right there. But yeah, Nick, what would you say why are you here? How did you get here? Things like that.
Yep. Got to echo the same story there. Obviously we had, kind of similar journeys in the college football world and got to play a few years. It was 4 for you, wasn't it? 4.5.
And forever. Played 5 years of college football. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, got to run down that path. That was fun. But yeah, Griff and I got to meet at the University of Albany. Got to be pretty good friends. We started door dashing together, hanging out. And then we became roommates, which was kind of a surprise. We ended up we had an open room in our apartment, and we had another guy that was trying to come in And that kind of fell through. He kind of kicked himself out at one point, but we were like, hey, let's bring Griff in here. And so we got to be roommates and stuff. So that was fun. What were you going to say?
On that note, since everybody can already get the taste of what this podcast is about to be really about, we've been doing whatever it takes, okay, over here for a while, me and Nick, talking about door dashing back in college when we're also college athletes at the same time. We just needed a little extra cash. We loved the little money on the side, we wanted to be involved in things. And that actually ties right into really like, how did me and Nick get into Bitcoin? And I think Nick would tell you I got into Bitcoin a bit earlier than he did, because that DoorDash money that I made while I was living with Nick actually ended up being my first Bitcoin investment back in, what was that, very early 2020, which, still to this day is doing pretty well, although I was pretty silly and bought it on an exchange, which is, I would kick myself now a little bit, but yeah, pretty crazy. That's how it's crazy how we both started living together. We're finishing up school. We're both kind of like looking at what's next. I was going to play a little bit more maybe, but you were full on looking into getting a job, getting into the real world. And Nick actually got into the world of the insurance game there for a little bit. And Nick could probably talk to you a little bit about the insurance game and kind of how that probably taught him a lot about traditional finance. And look where he's at, ladies and gentlemen. He's over here. So I'll let Nick tell you about that.
Yeah, so it definitely is interesting. We're in upstate New York. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Griff, you're from somewhere around Cleveland, Ohio, right? What town is it?
Columbus,
Ohio. Okay, that's what it is. My bad. Columbus, Ohio. So we're both a decent ways away from home. We graduated. I moved back home. Griff moved to Sacramento. That's a long story short there. But we hopped in, and Griff started in business. I started in business. So it's kind of like, okay, we're graduating. Let's figure out the real world. We graduated right in the middle of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. So that was an interesting landscape to enter the economy, right, for the first time in like the real workforce. And I got to get a start in traditional finance, doing financial planning, but primarily life insurance sales. I got to learn a lot about traditional finance, and that was a ton of fun. I graduated with a marketing degree, and so really got to spend my 5th year of college getting a finance degree in personal finance is kind of the way that I look at it. But man, it was a great experience. But the more you learn, the more that you'll find the value of Bitcoin.
Yeah, no kidding. And I remember some of the times, Nick, as I'm literally dollar cost averaging my life into Bitcoin, Nick is over here talking to me about whole life insurance and just like a lot of stuff that what I was kind of learning through Bitcoin is like, not that they were bad options in a fiat world in the traditional game that we're playing, but it's funny what Bitcoin can show you. And like Bitcoin, in my opinion, is something that is going to do right away compared to even the traditional game, or I think is what do people call it nowadays? It's not just the traditional game, but like the old people game, the boomer game, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's just like Bitcoin opens up your timeline, just makes it so much bigger. I think that's like one of the best things about Bitcoin is all of a sudden I am not a history guy, but now all of a sudden you'll hear me talking about Greeks and whatever. And like, because it's very cool because it makes a lot of sense because money is as old as time. Right. So it's funny how me and Nick really collided a little bit for a while. As I was in outside sales, he's in the whole life insurance game. I'm Bitcoin. Nick is here. And I think, I'm not sure what specifically got Nick into Bitcoin, and he can probably tell you that. But for me, I could tell you it was literally that history of money, Robert Breedlove kind of going on. Actually, it was a Robert Breedlove Twitter thread. Like nowadays, like I want to post Twitter threads, but it was just a Twitter thread about like the hardness of money, what Bitcoin is, why money is important, why sound money is important, just like now very simple things. But I've read that thread like 50 times because it's just like, and I send it to everybody, and he used to be his pinned thread, but now it's not. So I wish Robert would put that back on his pinned thread because I still want to read it like 15 times. But that's really what got me into Bitcoin and just made me I've almost been a maximalist from day one. I did trade some of those kind of shit coins there for a little bit, but as everybody knows, money is money. And actually, I'd say if you're a Bitcoiner, it's very easy to time some of these shit coins if you just follow the trends of Bitcoin. But long story short, that's how I got into Bitcoin. That is like the first thing I read that just, I was like, wait a second, whoa, money has changed. Like money is now changed. Like everybody needs to get on this new thing. This is good for people. This is where the world is going. But what got you into it, Nick? Because you got into it probably almost a little over a year after I probably got into it. And I was probably talking your ear off about it, as every Bitcoiner does. But
yeah, no, it's kind of interesting to think back on it because we had filmed a little pilot episode previously before this one, and we had talked about several ideas and topics that we want to talk about and stuff. And one of those was that, Griff, you got an economics degree, and I think that we can both agree that we didn't know what money was,
No.
in the way that we understand it now. And not to say that, we've got all the answers, but, you start looking around, you start looking for answers, and you'll start to learn more. I mean, that's the way that it works. Right. But it really is interesting. I mean, we graduated, start with the group that I was with here in Tulsa, and doing financial planning and life insurance, disability insurance, and all those pieces, investments as well and stuff. So the equities market. So I was really ingrained in that world. And whenever I got started there, I think it's good for anybody, no matter what you're doing. If it's something that you're interested in, if it's something that you're trying to understand, if you're trying to decide if you believe in something, go out and learn all the good things and go out and learn all the bad things. Try to find everything to discredit it, find everything that supports it, put it all together and try to come up with your own opinions. Right. And so that's what I did with my role and what I was doing for my clients within the traditional financial industry. And it was a lot of fun because I got to learn a lot of it. I mean, we're sitting here talking on a podcast that's about money, economics, business, investments, and Bitcoin. And so this stuff has kind of just been a hobby for me. But yeah, so it's been fun to kind of learn the traditional industry. But while I was learning that, I got Griff in this year, Bitcoin, 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 Bitcoin. And I'm like, what is this guy talking about? Right. And not that I didn't believe in it per se, but I just didn't know anything about it. I hadn't looked into it at all. And so I was like, I'm not putting my money in anything if I haven't looked into it, And at that point, for me, based on my limited understanding, it was still like such a speculative type of investment, and hadn't really looked into what the real value of it was supposed to be. And eventually, now that I know is, and so it's kind of interesting, right? So I had these pieces that I thought the puzzle were made of. And then after I had left that role, and I'm now in construction with a general contractor here in Tulsa in a completely separate industry, I left that role. And here's Griff, Bitcoin, still going. And so I'm like, what is this guy talking about? What the hell's going on here? What is Bitcoin? And I mean, as soon as I let Griff get just an inch of ground on me, I mean, it was just gone from there. And then it was like, okay, let me read something about this. And then I read something. I was like, all right, let me watch something about this. Let me read some more stuff. I think I might buy some just to like get some exposure, Maybe let me read a little bit more. I'm going to start buying some more. And so it kind of just, it's been what I think like maybe 2 or 3 months, maybe a little bit more, since I like really got in and started learning and putting money in. And, it's been a fun experience. Of course, this is all, my hobby at the same time, as well as it is yours, I'm sure. But yeah, it's kind of interesting kind of having both the perspectives of the traditional world as well as the Bitcoin world. But as I mentioned earlier, the more that I learned about the traditional world, I was like, like it's such a weird thing. You look at the equities market, the derivatives market, all the futures and all those things, dude. It's such a strange deal. Dude, annuities are such a strange product. I don't understand how these companies make these things, and it's crazy, dude. There's so many levers to it that people are pulling. It's just such corruption, right? And maybe not necessarily in a bad way. I say corruption, maybe more controlled or stimulated in some type of way that's not natural, right? Which leads back to that question of like, okay, what is money? Like, what is this thing supposed to be?
Like, does it lead you back to like part of it though, like what really got you into Bitcoin and like some of these traditional games that you were playing? Were you ever just sitting there like, well, but like, what's like backing all of this? Like, how is this like, aren't these, isn't it weird? Everybody's just like lending money out and you're like, but what is this money? Like at the end of the day, this is just paper. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like did it click for you in any of our conversations? Was it like was it a certain personality within Bitcoin? Because I know for me, like there's some pretty strong personalities in Bitcoin. I follow pretty much everybody on my personal Twitter on all sides of Bitcoin. Peter McCormick to Stoney BTC to Michael Saylor, like people shit talk each other within the Bitcoin community, which I think personally is like a really good thing. But what about all of this that you were doing got you to go, okay? Because guys, I'm telling you right now, Nick, he buys Bitcoin. Like he's working his personal finance, but he buys Bitcoin. That is his staple at this point. So what, like, was it the speculative asset part of it where you're like, oh my God, I'm going to make, how much money could I make just investing some money into Bitcoin now? And in 10 years, I could be done working, really. Like, I mean, if you're buying Bitcoin this early, or what was it about it? Like specifically, like,
I think it's, this might sound kind of funny here. It's very similar to I think, being attracted to a significant other, right? What initially draws you in? Man, this chick is hot. She's got a booty. She's got a cute face. Ooh,
Yeah.
that initial like, hey, I can make some money on Bitcoin. This thing's going to cruise up. Look at these rates of return. Wow, this is interesting. Let me put a couple of bucks in here, see what happens. Let me put a couple bucks. And whenever I put that in there, that will make me more motivated to go in and do some more research, right? Because now I'm invested, right? Now let me go find some information. And so what initially got me in was the speculative, the growth potential. And then as I got in, I was like, oh, this isn't quite what I thought it was, right? And I will say, so whenever I was at Inspire, the conversation about inflation, right? That was so foreign to me, right? Because we had talked about this 3% inflation, annualized inflation number over the last 100 years averaged out, right? So I'm like, then Griff's over here, Bitcoin, inflation. It's an inflation hedge, all this stuff.
Kinds of stuff. Yeah, I definitely, because I listen to Breedlove, so everybody knows if that's who really got me into it. Everybody knows the talk tracks I was spitting in Nick this whole time. But
so the interesting part, right, is in my world with the traditional financial industry, there's all this talk about a 3% averaged out 100-year average inflation, 3%. And if that's true, everything that we were doing is the correct thing to be doing, right? We leveraged a lot of arbitrage type methods, all that type of stuff, right? As well as how do we keep cash flow under management so that we're by design operating and not by default. And it's really good. And it's stuff that I've learned that I'm continuing to implement in my own personal finances. And we'll get into that at some point. But then you leave that world, right? And you almost get brainwashed of some sort, right? Because you've got all these people, all these huge industries and companies that are incentivizing, pushing this idea of 3%. It's only 3%. It's 3%. It's 3%, right? Because then you don't really see what's going on. Well, whenever I pulled myself away and I was no longer in that industry, and I got into Bitcoin Twitter, which if you haven't gone down there, go check out a few of those rabbit holes. Griff's already mentioned some of the threads and stuff, but I get in there and I'm like, inflation, this is kind of different than what I thought it was. And now being, January 8th, 2022, we know what's happening with inflation this year, the past 2 years, really, with all the money printing that the Fed and Jerome Powell are doing. And so, yeah, I think that the further I got into it, the more that I learned that there's a lot more to it than the speculative growth aspect. So.
Yeah. And I mean, this is our first episode, so we're really just here to try to tell you guys, what got us and how, why we're kind of here. And I think I already spoke on, Bitcoin to me, fundamentally, it just changes everything. It changes what money is. And in that, it also has the ability to bank the unbanked. It has the ability to globalize the world. It has the ability to stop poverty. It has the ability to do so many things that people don't understand. But fundamentally, I think why me and Nick are here is because we're young guys that just got out of school, and Bitcoin is our generation's internet, our generation's TCP IP. This is our generation's Google, our generation's whatever you want to call it. Some might even say this might be humankind's next industrial revolution. So I think me and Nick just see the importance of what's going on here, and we don't really care what the price is. We don't really care if this thing goes to 5,000, 4,000. You're talking to a couple of guys that are trying to learn how to code or about to buy Bitcoin nodes. I'm over here like I'm just ready to do every single thing, and we're trying to bring it to you live, because while we do know a lot about Bitcoin, and while we do enjoy finance and economics, we have so much to learn, and we're constantly learning. And that's kind of the most important part about this podcast, is you're going to be learning with us a little bit, but at the same time, I think you might enjoy me and Nick's personality and how we approach not just Bitcoin, but how we're approaching life. Very positive. And a lot of that really does stem from Bitcoin, because if you are a believer in the traditional and in the, you know, what's wrong in the world and the negative, then you probably didn't get a new job in 2020 and 2021, 2022. You probably didn't go and make more money. You probably got lazier. You probably stopped going to the gym, you know, and we're here with you. But at the same time, you know, me and Nick don't fall in that category of bullshit. We just kind of keep moving. We keep learning, and we keep stacking fucking sats. And, you know, for me, I just want to establish here right now, our mission is to just spread an awareness, Bitcoin awareness, first and foremost, because we feel like spreading Bitcoin awareness is like spreading fucking 1776 American democracy. So we feel like it's rather important to just hop on. And if we ever become those people to help you along your Bitcoin journey, or to get you started, whether it's a Twitter thread or this podcast or a YouTube video, you know, I think that's what we're here to do. And Nick could probably, you know, touch on that as we wrap up this first episode here, but we're really just here to maybe be your guys' next, you know, spiritual guide into Bitcoin, and or just a good positive influence on, you know, what's going on in the world, because we're not going to sit on here and be too negative about too much of anything, because with Bitcoin, not too much to be negative about anymore. You know, we're really off and running now. I mean, since 2008, and the Genesis block was what, like, I think like 2 days ago, technically. And
yep,
just the history of Bitcoin and where we're going. And thank goodness it happened in 2008. And thank goodness for Satoshi, because we really are just like, in essence, like Bitcoin disciples a little bit here, just trying to spread some awareness while we're learning just as much as everybody else is learning. So Nick, put it up for us here, but, you know, I hope you guys are excited to, you know, hear some of our takes. We're just a couple of college athletes that studied economics, that after we got out of school, we're both kind of in sales and business management. We want to be entrepreneurs, but we love numbers. We love economics. We love people. So it's kind of like numbers and people, you know, because we're not really here for all the other bullshit. We're here for the money, and we're here for the people, because at the end of the day, money is what controls the people. So Nick, you can touch up on that, but I think that's kind of what we're here to do.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on that pretty good. It's important to note that Griff and I were having these conversations for probably 4 or 5 months. I mean, we would talk multiple times a week for 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, about, what is this, man? Did you see this? What is this about? What's going on with that? What do you mean by this? How does this work? Can you send me some articles? What can I read here? You got to listen to this. You got to read this, you know, whatever. And so it's kind of like that active learning piece, which I think is a lot of fun. And I know specifically for myself, when I'm learning something new, and especially if it's something that I'm interested in and interested in learning about, you know, as we've mentioned, you know, this type of stuff is really my side hobby, you know, all the economics and money and investments. And I just think it's fun to learn about and hey, if we can provide a better life for ourselves and for others, that's a great benefit, you know? And so it's interesting that, you know, pretty much the mission of this deal is like, hey, we want to share our story, right? We're, like Griff said, we're a couple of guys that just a couple of years out of college. You know, one of my big personalities, Griff, you've mentioned a couple of years, is Anthony Pompliano. I love the Pomp Show, the Best Business Show. I watch it almost every day. and love some good Michael Saylor and stuff, right? But those guys seem like they're so much different than who we are, and I feel like we're more representative of the masses, right? We're more of the normals as far as we don't have all of those resources and all that stuff. And not to say that they've done that in a bad way, but I think that we've got a little bit more of a real world perspective. And I think that that's kind of cool. And so we just want to learn and share information, and we'd love you guys to learn along with us. So appreciate you guys watching episode number 1 here. That was just kind of a quick intro of who we are and what some of our introductions to Bitcoin were. Stay tuned, because we're going to get into some good stuff. We're going to get down into the weeds. We're going to pull back up. We're going to have a macro view as well. And we're going to keep you guys updated on some of the current events that are happening as things happen. And it'll be fun to kind of come along this journey and see where we take it, see where Bitcoin goes from here, where the economic system goes. It'll be fun to kind of track all this stuff. So we appreciate you guys watching. Interact with us on Twitter at, I think it's Nyc Griff Show, isn't it? Is it Nyc Griff Show on Twitter?
Yeah, and we're on that new GETTR thing too, because we're not going to make this whole podcast very political, but the GETTR thing is just another option that, Twitter really is like, it's not the only thing anymore. So you can follow
out on Twitter. What is it here? At
Twitter,
Nyc Griff Show. We got one follower, and I think it's Griff. We're going to start being a little bit more active on here. This being the first episode, we're going to start really pushing some content, start doing some stuff. So come interact with us. We'd love to talk with you. We're all about conversations. We're looking forward to at some point having guests on, and we just want to have conversations like, hey, if you got a different point of view, or you've got questions, or you've got, maybe we've got questions that, we're just here to learn. So let's hop on, let's learn together.
And we're going to go find, if we need to go down a rabbit hole with our listeners, we're going to go find the people that we need to go down the rabbit hole with. Trust me, we need to learn about the Lightning Network, we're going to go get 10 people to talk to us about the Lightning Network on this podcast. So you can guarantee we're going to be talking our opinions, but this is a podcast we're going to be learning. We're going to be learning every week. So we appreciate you guys listening. And I hope you guys all start following, because, if you don't understand Bitcoin or it's new to you, this is probably going to be a really good place for you to start, because we're going to break it down from the beginning, and then we're just going to keep on rolling. And I think everybody can learn with us. So appreciate the time.
All righty. Peace. We'll see you in episode 2.